Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. We are 3/4 of the way through June, and still our gardens are lagging behind, where heat is the developing factor. For example, my hardy banana in a container is looking like it does in mid-May. My hardy miscanthus is just popping up around the edges of the clumps. Many of the ornamental grasses are slow. Magnolias and dogwoods are growing like weeds. Rhodos are late blooming, but they are ready to be deadheaded and trimmed. Go to my website, www.brucezimmerman.com, and read the article on rhodos to see how to both deadhead and trim your rhododendrons. Your containers will need feeding unless you used a full season slow-release fertilizer. Your turf grass is ready for its summer feeding. Remember, summer rates for summer feeding. Irises are divided 6 to 8 weeks after blooming, so it is time to start dividing the early blooming irises. If your peonies are finished blooming, it's time to deadhead them. The echinaceas are starting to bloom, so do not forget to deadhead them as necessary. It's very important. Very often, most of them are not going to continue blooming unless you do deadhead them as well. Often there's a lot of the dianthus that are also starting to finish up. My tulips are ready to be twisted and pulled off. In other words, they're very yellow, very brown, and almost laying on the ground. Not until then do you take the tops off of your tulips. Your daffodils aren't supposed to be in the same condition until when you do remove them. Please do not tie them in knots like we were once taught and let them finish off. You want to give them as much time to develop the food for next year's flowers. In my garden, I have yet to see a yellow leaf on a daffodil. They are growing and still producing and feeding the bulbs down below. That's a very unusual at this time of year. The colchicums, the autumn crocus, are finishing up their leaves. They're starting to yellow and flop down. Give them another week, maybe 10 days if it's really cold, and they will be ready to be trimmed. Now remember, colchicine is not good for anybody, so wear rubber gloves when handling all parts of the plant, and don't compost them, just make them gone to the street. I think that it's almost time to go and walk your garden. There may be some people whose apples, if they're espaliating them, will need to be trimmed and reduce the amount of summer growth. Now, this does not mean remove the spurs, but just remove some of the excess to expose the small ripening fruit. I know my hardy fig trees are starting to develop fruit, so therefore do not let them stress out. Otherwise, they will not size up. And if they don't size up, even if they ripen, you just don't get as big and as nice and sweet a fig as you really want to. So that's important. A lot of the figs, even given protection, did not survive the winter. These hardy figs are supposed to. We'll see what happens this coming winter. So they will be growing in containers and healed into the ground for winter. We'll see what happens, and let's hope they continue to grow. But if they do die back down to the ground, the hardy figs will sprout back up again and give you fruit again in the same year. Now there's what I call a bonus. Watch out for your perennial marigolds. They're starting to really pop. They're going to start to flop unless you've given them some support, possibly a reinforced concrete cage, because remember, they're going to be 7-8 feet tall, and you want to make sure you get them kept up. You'll also find they seed like crazy in your garden and become an invasive weed, so you may be actually going and pulling out perennial marigolds for for this. Now, some of them also, people call it not perennial marigolds, but also perennial sunflowers. So one or the other, basically, and two common names for the same plant. So if you're going to do any trimming on your junipers or your yews, etc., make sure it's only on the new growth. I'm finding a lot of them are not producing a lot of growth, and they seem to be lagging behind. Spruce seem to be doing quite nice. Pines are a little stunted in my opinion, and the junipers and the yews are definitely behind. The cedars seem to be doing quite all right. In fact, I've got my daughter out trimming the globe cedars this week as well. Your cotoneasters are now ready to be trimmed. Okay, so that's enough for this weekend's job list. I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this has been the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.